Hello YouTube and Onwards patrons, and welcome back to another faction review. This one will be a double post between Onwards and YouTube, and today we are doing the original army. We're doing the one I get my name from, the Irongutsman, the Ogres, the Fat Lads, the army that runs at you, the monster trucks. Okay, we're doing them today. I sort of put off doing this mainly because, to be honest, I was slightly disappointed with some aspects of the book, but kind of digesting it a little bit, I've become more excited about the book in general, especially when maybe some points are moved around a little bit. I think it'll be a really interesting faction pack, okay? As always, we'll go through the allegiance abilities, and then we'll jump into the units, and we'll make the tier list as we go, okay? So, let's start off with the allegiance abilities. Now, there's a bit of random racism going on here, okay? So, you'll notice a distinct lack of, Gnoblars in the allegiance abilities, okay? So this affects all, Ogres and Rhinoxes and stuff, right? So, pick your friendly Ogre or Rhinox unit. Now, the Rhinox unit is just the scrap launcher, okay? And you basically do 2-up on what, the 51% chat, which is a Discord, which you can join to play TTS games, but we're calling this the shitty D3, okay? That's the name of what so when you explain to your opponent, it's a shitty D3. That means on a 2-up do that many mortal wounds, right? Or 2-up, whatever. Right? So when you charge, you do 2-up, shitty D3. You do that many mortal wounds, which is obviously worse than the previous one. But less reliant on rolling big charges, but still a bit worse. You get +2 to run rolls if you haven't used the Feast of Flesh ability, which is once per battle. Okay, so once per battle. Lots of people will be getting that wrong. This only happens once per battle, okay? At the end of any turn, you can pick each friendly Ogre unit that's in combat and that use the fight ability to be the targets. And basically, you roll a D3, and on a 2-up, you heal, and then you do the same amount of mortal damage to enemies in combat. So on the turn where, maybe your opponent charges you, get really stuck in combat and you take some damage, this could be nice. Or the big send turn where you need to go in and do it, could be nice. But overall, it's just okay, alright? I think with the Beastclaw Raiders, it's probably more interesting than the Gutbusters because the heal is more of a priority. But even on the Gutbusters, sometimes healing some wounds can be nice. Gives you some sense of recursion. But overall, yeah, bit weakish, I would say. The allegiance abilities. Okay, then we have the battle formations. So we get +1 to cast for friendly Ogre MAWTRIBES wizards. That's pretty insane, that subfaction, I think. Brutal stock. When a Beastclaw Raiders monster uses the trampling charge, you add 1 to the amount of mortal damage inflicted, if any. So you still have to roll a 3-up on the shitty D3. So basically it's 0 or 3 or 4 mortal wounds. Okay, now that can really add up, right? If you charge with, multiple Beastclaw Raiders monsters, you could do 12 mortal wounds to the same unit maybe. But also, you could roll 3 1s and do nothing, right? So these are a little bit inconsistent way of doing damage, I think. Okay, Heralds of the Everwinter is interesting, but probably too specific to be useful. You get -1 to hit only from shooting that target only Ogre MAWTRIBES infantry units while they're holding within 12 of any Beastclaw Raiders heroes. Now, what I think is okay for doing this with is just maybe running an Icebrow Hunter on foot that can't be shot, and then you just run a normal Ogres list. It also doesn't say not Gnoblars. So this is one of the few abilities that actually works on Gnoblars because it just says Ogre MAWTRIBES infantry, and they are that. So if you're looking to spam Gnoblars, I think this is probably the one you would take, right? Maybe you take some Gnoblars and some Thunder Tusks to a little kind of shooting castle sort of build. Then you'd think about using this. And then Black Powered Fanatics, I think is great. Now, whether or not these units are great is a separate discussion. Okay, but as an ability, it's great. Ranged weapons used by friendly Lead Belters and Iron Blaster units have shoot in combat while they're within the range of a friendly Ogre MAWTRIBES hero. Now, what's great about that, right, is it's super easy to just, retreat an Ogre MAWTRIBES hero or move an Ogre MAWTRIBES hero in combat range of the Lead Belchers before the shooting phase, right? Now, you still can't covering fire while you're in combat, but what you are going to be able to do is, maybe your opponent charges you in, you're going to be able to shoot with the lead belchers or iron blasters and then fight with them as well. So that makes lead belchers and iron blasters very much more reliable than they would be otherwise, and you don't have some like negative incentive of I want to go in and do my mortal wounds on the charge and do damage in combat, but then I won't be able to shoot. So this removes that, okay? But does necessitate that you do run some heroes. So I think Black Powder Fanatics and the Prophets of the Gulping God are probably the most interesting to me. I think even in Beastclaw Raiders, you might not take Beast Handlers, you know, unless you're just running pure monster trucks. I think maybe you still would consider running the +1 to cast, or I don't know. It depends if you have any wizards or not, but I think you kind of need to play this game at the moment. So I probably would just go to +1 to cast one almost every time, because the casters are good, as we'll see. Oh, worth noting. I guess the -1 to hit also would affect your infantry heroes as well. Okay, just a small thing, but your infantry heroes would be a further -1 to hit. So if they move within 12, they can shoot you, but they'd be -2 to hit. Could be something, right? Okay. Heroic traits. Great Gut Lord. Ignore negative modifiers to the unit's control score and to hit and wound rolls for this unit's attacks. Now, this would be great, but it's still not going to affect your companion abilities. So, yeah. I'm not sure. It's maybe interesting on, like, a Blood Pelt Hunter. You know, he can go in and do all-out attack, and then his shooting is not going to get hurt by the guarded hero ability. He's just going to be able to shoot something on threes and threes with his abilities. But he's a little bit expensive, as we'll see. Booming Roar, subtract 5 from the control scores of enemy infantry units while they're in combat with this unit. I think that one is severely underrated. I think that is a very strong ability. There's a lot of infantry in the game at the moment. There's heaps of Graveguard running around, stuff like this, right? And being able to go in and potentially sneak an objective grab with this could be massive. But 99% of the time, you're going to go touch Buddy Everwinter. Unless you don't run... if your only heroes are wizards or priests already, then you probably go one of the other two. But I think because this exists, you can justify running, you know, an Icebrow Hunter or a Tyrant or a Blood Pelt Hunter. You know, one of those foot heroes that otherwise are not so good because you become a priest. And the prayers are interesting, as we'll see. Alright, Artifacts of Power. Gruesome Trophies. Add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks that targets heroes or monsters made by friendly OGOR MAWTRIBES units while they're wholly within 12. So, now it affects everything. So, it's not just Gutbusters. But it's only combat attacks, unfortunately. So the Iron Blaster will not get +1 to hit anymore for shooting, which sucks, but you've extended it to Beastclaw Raiders as well, which could be massive. Now, it's still not going to affect the companion weapons, which it sucks, okay, because there's a lot of those. So for Beastclaw, still, it's a bit mid, to be honest, but the rest of it's good. Once per battle in a combat phase, Fang of Gur, you can basically turn off wards for an enemy unit in combat. That's pretty nice, I think. If you're going Beastclaw Raiders heavy, I think this is probably slightly better than the other one. And worth noting, it would happen before many of your rampages, okay? So could be good to turn off wards and then do the rampages. Then, once per battle in any shooting phase, we have the Elixir of the Frostworm, where you pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit. So you have to already be in combat, and it has to be the shooting phase. And you roll a dice, and you heal that amount on you, and then do that amount on the enemy. No, that's terrible. Okay. Now, I mean, I guess if you have something stuck in combat with something, and you want to heal and do damage, it's maybe okay, but I think the other two abilities are stronger. Okay, Spell Lore. This is a pretty interesting one, right? Now, we have Troggoth Guts, where you pick an OGOR MAWTRIBES unit, so no racism there. Okay, any keyword. Okay. You heal D3 and add 3 to their control score. Pretty decent for an unlimited spell, and it's also cast on a 5, so pretty easy to get off. Now, what's interesting about this is you could stick it on, like, just a unit of 2 doggos, and potentially just go in and steal an objective, or, you know, stick it on a unit of Gnoblars, and then maybe chuck on like the Tyrant buff, and then they could be control score 7 with one model. That could be pretty nice, right? So potential ways of stealing objectives with silly units that shouldn't, and then your other big ogre guys will become very dominant on objective scoring. We have a -1 to hit spell, which could be quite good to cast in your opponent's turn sometimes. You know, they're looking to send something into you. You've just moved up all your stuff, and now you're in range to cast this. Could be pretty nice. And then Blood Feast. This affects Gnoblars. I just like to say that. You can give them +1 attacks, so you could have some 2-attack little Gnoblars running around. Could be fun. But otherwise, obviously, great for your Gluttons or your Iron Guts or any of your Bashy, well, I guess mainly those two, Bashy infantry units. Oh, sorry. Ogre infantry, okay. Sorry, my bad. This one doesn't affect Gnoblars. This is the one that is keyword locked, so, okay. No 2-attack Gnoblars, but you can, put on your lead belchers, your Gluttons, your Iron Guts, all that good stuff. Okay, then the Prayer Law. This one's a bit complicated. So the unlimited one, basically, it's on a 4-up. You pick a terrain feature, you put a Blizzard token on it, and then it gets the obscuring ability, which actually is kind of interesting. For the TTS tournaments we tend to play, for the most part, stuff that isn't already obscuring is probably impossible. But if it's big enough, then you could still stand behind it. So potential ways of dodging shooting, definitely interesting, and definitely worth considering having a priest in your army just for the flexibility of this ability, right? Could potentially win you the game against a shooting army in some specific situations. And then basically, if the chanting rolls are 10, all the terrain features that have a Blizzard token kind of turn on a ward, and so Beastclaw Raiders units have a 5-up ward while they're within 3 of any terrain features that have Blizzard tokens. I don't know why that doesn't just say within combat range, but anyway. So quite nice for potentially giving your Beastclaw Raiders a ward, which none of them have anymore, but a little bit unreliable, isn't it? Okay, Pulverizing Hailstorm. I mean, it might be interesting, right, to take the reroll chant command trait, just to make sure you can guarantee on like turn, you could do it turn 2 if you counter chant both turns or something, to get that 10+, and then be able to turn on the 5-up ward on turn 3. But you might have to run like 2 or 3 priests to be able to do this playstyle, so maybe possible. I mean, maybe you can run like, 3 to 4 Huskguards and Stonehorn. I'll just remember to get the points up while I'm here. Maybe you could run like 3 to 4 Huskguards, have multiple priests. Maybe like 3 Huskguards, another hero to take the priest command trait, and then you can have like 4 priests. And maybe this sort of play style is hypothetically possible, right? But the monsters have got cheaper, but you're still looking at 300 points odd for a Huskguard and Stonehorn and 270 for a Thunder Tusk, and they're not the greatest War Scrolls, so doable, but I think potentially difficult. Pulverizing Hailstorm, you're going to be able to do mortal wounds, and if you roll a 10+, you can double a shitty D3, it's fine. And then you can basically give a Mournfang or Monster Pack run and charge, which they already move a lot anyway, and you would get +2 to run though, so you could make it really long, and you can reroll run and charge rolls if you roll an 8+. So I really like the Blizzard token one, but the other 2 ones are a little bit middling. So I think overall the Prayer Law is quite a bit less strong than the Spell Law, unfortunately, which is unfortunate because the wizards are much cheaper than the priests. So I think in theory it should be the other way around, but yeah, unfortunately it's not. Okay, then we're into units. We're going to come back to Kragnos and do him at the end, because I think we have to kind of see the whole army for us to make a good decision on that. So we'll come back to him. So we're going to start with the Tyrant. Okay, now part of the Tyrant's War Scroll is not on his War Scroll. Now basically he gets a 6-up ward and gives Iron Guts a 6-up ward if they're in combat range. So he's got like a little bodyguard mechanic. Okay. He has some attacks in combat that still don't do as much damage as he should. He does okay damage. He doesn't chain fight though, so you're not going to get to fight with him honestly that much. Yeah. Now, your hero phase, you're going to be able to give an Ogre MAWTRIBES unit, so it could be any unit in the whole army, +3 to control score, which is pretty nice. And then your Brawler Guts passive basically means that you guarantee getting mortal wounds off when you're trampling charge, which is quite nice because you add 1 to the D3 roll, right? So it's always going to be 2 up. So you're going to do 2, 3, or 4 mortal wounds with this every time you charge, which is actually pretty good. You can definitely guarantee some damage there. And he's very good wearer of artifacts, so you can give him, like, you know, the classic setup would be Trophy Rack and then the Priest, and then he becomes a Priest. And then the main thing you're going to be casting with the Priest is probably just the damage spell, or just like stacking up, you know, tokens to cast the damage one. And just to refresh your memory, the damage one, you know, basically, it's not that amazing, but you still can potentially do, you know, maybe you do like 3 or 4 mortal wounds. So this guy can be like a little, nice little mortal wound bomb and do some damage in combat as well. The problem is the cost. So he's 180 points, and the Iron Guts are expensive as well, and that just makes me think it's just too expensive for what it does. So I'd probably go like B. I wouldn't put it lower than that, because of the possibility to make him a Priest. It just means he actually does something. He might even just end up being like a banish bot, right? Like you just cast spells with the other lads, and he just banishes stuff, and that's his job, and that's perfectly fine. Yeah, but I think an okay War Scroll. Nothing too sexy, but he's okay. Slaughtermaster. Alright. Now, I think we all know what this does by now. So, it's whatever in combat. Yeah, now what's funny is in the Roving Boar Army of Renown, you can give him Rend 3 in combat, which is quite funny. But yeah, he's whatever in combat. Now, each time an enemy unit's destroyed by a combat attack, so it has to be combat. Can't be charging. Can't be shooting, can't be feasting at the end of the turn. Has to be combat attack, so actually a little bit restrictive. You give this unit a Grizzly Remains point, and in any hero phase, you can spend 1 of the points, 1 or more of the points, and you pick a friendly Gutbusters unit, Hollywood and 12. Then pick 1 of the following effects. They get a 5-up ward or +1 attack for the rest of the turn. So I think it's... Having played some games with it, it's slightly overrated. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's awkward. I had a few games where I just didn't kill anything in the correct way. Like, did some mortals here that killed something, or something didn't quite die. There's a swinginess aspect to this War Scroll that makes it potentially not so good. Now, it's cheap enough that you wouldn't put it anything but A tier, I think. But I can see that there's some problems with this War Scroll. Like, staying holy within 12, hard. Potentially could lead to you dying, okay? Being holy within 18 of the unit when it kills something, that's super easy to do, alright? But being holy within 12, actually killing a unit, being in a situation where, you know, the 5-up ward's going to protect enough units that it's going to be good. Like, if you go in and kill 1 unit, but your army's still exposed and they can just ignore the 5-up ward unit, it's a problem. So, what this kind of pushes your army build towards doing is running massive blobs of Gluttons or something, right? Like, your 12 block of Gluttons, okay? And then you can go in, easily kill a unit, get the 5-up ward, right? That's what it's pushing towards running. If you run other builds, it's not as good, okay? So, I think overall, as a War Scroll, I don't think I would put it in S tier. You wouldn't go lower than A tier, but I don't think it's necessarily as insanely broken as it looks like on paper. It's great, but not insanely broken. This, on the other hand, is an S tier War Scroll. Okay. Now, the reason is because it's just a consistent effect that has no conditions, that is always good, and you have active synergy in your army in the form of +2 run in your allegiance abilities. That mean that you just have to take 1 butcher. in every single ogre list you run, you have to run 1 butcher if you have Gutbusters units, okay? And then other than that, it's a wizard 1, right? And, you know, you can easily get +1 to cast from the sub-faction. It's a bit less tanky than the Slaughtermaster, and it's 10 points more expensive, but this is the super good hero, I think, in my opinion. You probably run both, right? But I think out of the two, this one is slightly better. So I would put this one in S tier. Alright, Bloodpelt Hunter is a weird unit. So it's quite good at shooting, and there's a lot more things that are monsters now. So it's anti-monsterness, which is both in the rend, and then also you can give it this Beast Breaker thing, where if the target's a monster, it has 3 damage on its bow and 6 damage on its spear. And as I said before, you could give it ignore modifiers with its shooting weapons, and that would let it be better against normal heroes, where, okay, it's a bit swingier, but could be good. And then once per turn, now it's per army, so you can't spam these, but you can do a normal move if it's more than 9 from enemy units. Now, it's lost its ability to not be seen at range, but what's interesting about this unit is sticking in a forest, and also running and gunning to occupy a forest, right? Like, you put it on the line, and then in your opponent's turn, you just move it into a forest. It's quite good, right? It's also quite good for, like, normal move into counter charge. Could be quite good. Or normal move, I know you'd have to use several command points for this, but you could do normal move into cover fire into counter charge. But ultimately, it feels like a unit that's designed for, like, low points games. It's probably not going to do that much in a high points game for 170 points. I think it's too expensive. I mean, it's basically worse than it used to be, and it went up 40 points, so I would say that it's not so good. This one I can't really see myself running, to be honest. Probably put it in C. It's pretty bad, I think. Ogre Gluttons. Okay, so they have 4 attacks, 4s and 2s, rend 1, 2 damage, which is pretty nice. And if you use the Feast on Flesh ability battle, you add 1 for the control score, so they'd have... basically, you add 1 to the control value. That's really what that should say. But basically, you end up having, you know, control score, control value 3 for all the models is essentially what happens. So you're taking objectives if you do that. Very easy to use the Feast on Flesh ability. You just have to be in combat, and then once per battle, you use it. The only problem I find with them is if you verse modifiers like negatives to hit, or tons of bonuses to save, or minuses to attack, which exist in the form of bodyguard, the damage of this unit is not as high as you would think. So, and they often require you to spend a command point for all that attack. So this unit comes in at, let me see here, 220 points for 6. Now that's cheap enough that it would be a bit fraudulent for me not to put them in the S tier. But I just want to say that it's not a flawless unit. It can have matchups where you find yourself getting stuck because of the minuses to hit. But you still have your thing you used to with this unit, where if you verse no negatives, they will just murder low armor stuff, right? Like Plague Bearers, this sort of thing, or, you know, goblins. Goblins can give you negatives, but even then you're still going to murder a lot of goblins. So against your, you know, low armor stuff that doesn't have heaps of negatives, they're great. I would say that if you're going to spam them, you need to be aware that you're going to play some games where your opponent will have an answer, and these will not do much at all. They also die still very fast. You need to be aware of that. But I think one aspect of them I really like is that they're 4 health, and that means in the cavalry meta, you're going to be able to power through a lot. So you're going to be able to, like, go in, attack, feast on flesh, power through, and then maybe move on to an objective that you shouldn't be able to take, and then take it, right? That could be like a super nice play with these Gluttons. They're great with the Slaughtermaster. They get run and charge. Super solid unit. I think everyone knows that Gluttons are being spammed at the moment. Okay, Iron Guts. I still think these are insanely underrated, and I think that you should run 1 unit of 8. Okay, that is my selling point. Okay, I think you should run one unit of 8 with a Tyrant. That's where I've got to. Okay, so they have a 5-up save now. The combat is basically the same. They've gone from 3s and 3s to 4s and 2s. They get a 6-up ward near the Tyrant, and they can fight twice. Okay, once per battle. Fight twice with 25 attacks, 4s and 2s, ran 2, damage 3. Potentially could it be 5 attacks if you line everything up perfectly. This is your meaty go in to do damage unit. But I would say the problem with this unit is it's still just the double turn merchant. Okay, this unit is still just there's a prior roll that doesn't go your way and you lose the unit and it's gonna suck. But now, at least maybe there's some consequences for your opponent if they have to take the double to kill this unit, right? At least now, if you go in, hit and then your opponent doubles you back, they're going to potentially lose on points. Like, that's something that could happen, right? They kill you, but you have enough Gluttons to move on the round on the board, control stuff. And although you've lost your big hammer unit, you can still win on scoring. That's an angle, right? But ultimately, I still think if you need a unit to just go in and bash something, this is really nice. I think it's the most reliable way of killing a unit for the Slaughtermaster. So you definitely take... I mean, you would take a Slaughtermaster anyway, but you definitely take... maybe even 2 if you're going to take 8 Iron Guts, I think. Yeah. I think you kind of need to build an army around protecting these. But when you do, you will be rewarded. So I would put these in A tier. I wouldn't go into S, but somewhere here probably. Okay, Man-Eaters. They're the same as Gluttons in combat. And they have a once per turn army to 4-up ignore a non-core ability, which is okay. They don't have any of the requisite keywords to receive buffs, and so the answer to this is we're not taking Man-Eaters, okay? So rest in pepperonis, this is terrible. They're 170 for 3 as well. Gorger Morpack, so they don't have the Gutbusters keyword anymore, which is rude. They have a musician because they yell, which I think is funny. They can deploy in reserves, and they have 5 attacks, 4s and 2s, run 1/2 damage with anti-infantry +1, so they're like slightly better than Gluttons in combat. The problem is the points, so they're like 260 for 5. And I know they have 1 more health than the Gluttons, but you still have less health overall as a unit, and you're losing a lot of synergy. I'm not sure. I like the reserves thing in theory, but I don't know. I personally don't really like this unit. I mean, the damage is also not better either. It's basically the same damage as Gluttons. Less access to buffs, less synergy, less save. I'm not sure. For 260, I think it's a little bit unbalanced. Maybe if the Gluttons go up and then these go down, you could definitely make an argument for, but considering these are 40 more now, I would take them. Okay, Lead Belchers. Now, I'm going to play a bit of defense here because I think this unit is actually fine. I know it looks terrible on paper, but I think it's okay. Alright, so we have Lead Belcher Gun. So these are 4 of them for 150, which is cheap, right? Now, it's basically 43 attacks, 4s and 3s, rend 1, damage 1, which is nothing amazing. But if it hasn't moved, this turn, you get +1 to hit, but that's only in your shooting phase, so you couldn't, like, ignore the cover fire minuses to hit, so covering fire is pretty bad with this unit. And in combat, they're 2 attacks, 4s and 2s, no rend, 2 damage, which is pretty bad. And they can reroll 1 random characteristic for your Powder Gnoblar's ability. But if you reroll into 1, you lose Powder Gnoblar's. Now, what are these for? These are for multi-charging and doing mortal wounds, and then just doing chip damage with the Lead Belcher Gun. Does that make them good? Probably not. But I think you can put them in B tier. I think they're okay. They're like the same sort of level as the Tyrant in my head. I really think that they're fine. They're better than these 2 units in my opinion. I am a fan of doing chip mortal wounds, like accruing damage across the game. Playing an MSU playstyle I think is pretty strong at the moment. The shooting combat thing means that they sort of are going to do not quite the same level per point as Gluttons, but sort of the same kind of area. But you have the advantage of being more MSU. You have the disadvantage of potentially not getting as many buffs off. But I mean, if you end up stuck in combat, you have to shoot in combat. You'd be 3s and 3s, rend 1 damage 1 with 43 plus 1 attacks, I guess, because of the champion, and you get to re-roll 2 of those. You could actually do some okay damage in shooting. So yeah, I think they're okay. Alright, Iron Blaster. Now, this has a heavy price tag. It's 240 points, which is a lot. And you don't get the +1 rend used to get any more. And you don't get the +1 hit used to get any more. And Hail Shot also hits on 4s instead of 3s now. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. I would never run more than 1. But I think there's probably an argument for 1. Potentially. I think 1 with priority target as your cover fire shooting unit could be interesting. But ultimately, I still can't see spending that many points on it. I think it's worse than Lead Belchers, to be honest. I think it's like somewhere down here. I don't think it's that great. Speaking of not great, this one hurts. Gnoblar Scrap Launcher. So it's 3d6 attacks, 4s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage, but you get anti-infantry +1 rend. And crit auto wound. And you crit on 5s if you're in combat range of a Gnoblar's unit. And you can give something -1 to hit for the rest of the turn. But only in your turn. And this comes in at 180, so it's not that cheap either. So on average, you do like 3 auto hits, which is just like a couple of wounds, still 4-up save, probably. No, you're not running this thing. I think it's terrible. Is it as bad as Man-Eaters? No. I probably wouldn't put it lower than D, but nah. It's pretty awful. Gnoblars. Alright, this is an interesting unit. Namely because you can spam them in MSU and the Mortal Wounds thing doesn't quite work, but well, you can't spam the same enemy unit, but you can kind of spread it around, and this can kind of get you into a play style of doing sort of chip Mortal Wounds as your opponent approaches you, and this unit can kind of steal some objectives off people with getting control score bonuses and walking onto it. But ultimately, its main role is as a screen. The negative of it is the only way if you're going to run Gutbusters, I believe, to get this in your army. I'll just double check, but I think you have to run... Yeah, you have to run a Tyrant, basically. So that's the other bonus of running a Tyrant, is the fact that it can have everything in there. So, given you have to run a Tyrant, it's slightly less good, but still a screen in Ogres is great, and you can do lots of jank with this unit. So I would still say it's like comfortably like a B tier unit. It's pretty solid, yeah, but nothing insanely sexy. Alright, then we're into the Beastclaw Raiders units. Now, the Frosthorn and Stonehorn is like a nice beat stick. It still does a lot of damage, and it's actually a great recipient of all that attack, because everything wounds on 2s. So if you go to 3s and 2s on all the profiles, it's pretty nice, right? In that way, the Stonehorn's horns have actually been slightly buffed. So they used to be 4s and 3s. So going to 4s and 2s now means that this unit, when it charges, should just do more damage than before, I believe. But has no wards. There's 15 wounds on a 4-up save. No longer has the 3-up save. It brackets much less bad than it used to. Arguably has access to more healing. And once per turn, you can basically only use this once per army. You do D3 mortal wounds, and then you roll 2d6, and then you can move. And you can pass through models in the target unit, but you must end the move in combat. Could be a different unit, though. You ignore the first damage point that would be allocated to this unit in each phase, and if you do any damage to a hero or monster with the Frost Spear, they get -1 attack until the start of your next turn. Pretty nice, right? That's so you could potentially charge this guy in, stay in range of your Honor Guard, which might just be another monster, right? Easy to keep them up. Could be another monster. And then potentially you could hit, and then even if you don't kill the enemy monster, they're going to have -2 attacks. Could be pretty tasty, right? They're a bit less fast than they used to be. They're only 10-inch move, and you don't get +2 to move anymore, so quite a bit slower, but I still think they're really good. It's a 360 for this guy, and it's a nice beat stick. It can die easily, but you know, there are ways to get the 4-up ward. But I think you're happy running this as more of a hammer unit now than what it used to be, which is some weird anvil annoying thing that your opponent would have to deal with. So I think pretty solid. I would put this in A tier, I think. Where is it? This guy. Alright. Your Frostlord on Thundertusk. Alright, now. This one is insane. Alright? Now, I will explain why it's insane. In a moment. But, okay, so it's Ice Blast is whatever. Okay, 1 attack, 4s and 2s, Ren 1 damage, 3 plus 2. But it actually does a bit of damage in combat now. So 4 attacks with the Frost Spear, the same as we saw on the Stonehorn. And then your Thunder Tusk attacks now are like 3 attacks, damage 5 with anti-infantry plus 1 rend. We have once per turn, army in any movement phase, which is kind of an interesting timing, but you pick an enemy unit in combat, and on a 3-up, you do a 5-up horde clear. So that's swingy as hell, you have to roll a 3-up, and it's in a weird timing, but if you charge in, you don't kill something, or you just charge in, you tag something and then live, could do massive damage. Okay, but this ability is insane, the Bellowing Voice. Okay, this you can really, like, win a whole game in a charge phase, alright? So you pick any number of friendly Beastclaw Raiders units, Hollywood and 12, and each target can add 1 to the D3 roll made if that unit uses the Trampling Charge ability. Now, let's go back to the battle formations, okay? Because that has a massive effect with the battle formations, okay? So, in your battle formation, do you remember what it did with the monsters? Each time you charge, you add 1 to the mortal damage inflicted, if any. Okay, now the problem was, our Trampling Charge meant that we had to roll a 2-up on a D3, but we're going to add 1 to that. So it's guaranteed going off on a 2, okay? And then it goes off on a 2, we would do 2 mortal wounds, okay? But because we're adding 1 to it, we do 3 mortal wounds. Now, at the best, we could do 5 mortal wounds if we roll a 3, right? So suddenly, you're going from an unreliable ability to an ability that guarantees does 3 mortal wounds. So you guarantee to do 3 mortal wounds every time you charge a monster when you activate this ability, right? And on average, you're going to do basically 4 mortal wounds per monster. So let's say you charge 5 monsters in, you're going to do 20 mortal wounds in the charge phase. Okay? And this unit is only 300 points. It's an amazing recipient of I'm a Priest, okay? And I think that this is probably the best Beastclaw Raiders unit. Okay, so I think that this is a hot take o'clock, but I would put this in S tier, this one, because it makes your army do an absolutely ridiculous amount of damage in the charge phase. Here we go. Alright, that's the one. For 300 points, you have to run this if you're going to run Beastclaw Raider monsters, okay? Okay, Huskard on Stonehorn. Alright, this is another really solid one. So, you get one of the Chain Trap, Harpoon Launcher, or Blood Vultures. I am kind of a fan of the Chain Trap. It's a shorter range, but it does the most damage. The others I don't think do enough to justify them, so I probably would take that. RIP everyone who just has a bunch of vultures. Has the Stone Skeleton thing, and its ability is once per turn in your army in any combat phase, you pick each friendly and enemy monster within this unit's combat range, and you roll a dice for each target. If it's a OGOR MAWTRIBES unit, you get crit 2 hits. If it's an enemy unit, you -1 to hit for companion abilities. Right, and it's 300 points. So, potentially can get crit 2 hits, but slightly unreliable, and you have to kind of be in combat. So, realistically, you're only going to get probably 2 monsters of your own in range. On a 3-up, it does... well, and also itself, I guess. So, you could have 3, including itself. So, maybe you charge this and 2 Stonehorns in, and you could really have a big combat phase. So, I think you're probably going to take one. I don't think it's as strong as the... Frostlord on Thundertusk, because it's not a guaranteed ability, but you're still going to get massive value out of this one. I think this is another solid A tier unit. Okay, your Huskard on Thunder Tusk. I don't like this one as much. So it's a priest. It's 270. The damage output is really not good on this one. You can take a weapon and an ice blast, both of which don't really do much. And then once per turn, you pick an enemy infantry unit in combat, so not going to be useful versus every army. And on a 4-up, it gets strikes last. So this one is actually to the point where maybe you wouldn't take it, because they're trying to decide, like, they're trying to get you to bring like a singleton army. You probably just run one because it's cheap, it's 270, and you want another priest with Beastclaw. But as a unit, I don't think you'd go higher than B for this guy. Yeah, I don't think it's as good as it used to be, just because the shooting is much worse. The combat getting better is like a bit nice, but that's not why you're taking this guy. So him getting better in combat is not such a good thing. I'm not so sure. I think it's okay. It's a cheap monster, right? That can do charge mortals and then provide support as a priest, but nothing overly sexy, I don't think. Okay, Stonehorn Beast Riders. The same Stonehorn profile and the same weapon choices pretty much as the Huskar, but you get a harpoon launcher. So you're probably going to go harpoon launcher and chain trap. So have some shooting. And once per turn, when you charge on a 3-up, you can add d6 to the distance when you pile in when you attack. And this unit is 290 points, which I think is too expensive. Now, the reason I say it's too expensive is because the Huskard on Stonehorn is 300 points. And I don't know what you're getting for 10 points less. I mean, what you're getting basically is lower drop. That's what you're getting when you run this. But I'm not so sure, personally. I don't know if I'd run that one. Yeah. I think this one we might go down to B. Yeah. That's definitely the worst of the 3 Stonehorns. And then the Thunder Tusk Beast Riders. Same as the other Thunder Tusks in terms of damage and the Ice Blast. And once per turn, you can pick an enemy unit in combat on a 3-up. If it's a target, -3 from control score. If it's a non-monster unit, subtract 5 from the control score. And this unit is 240 points. Again, you're kind of paying for the fact that you can be lower drop, but I still don't like it. In fact, I think this one is even more useless than the other ones. Probably this one goes C. So, overall, I like the 4 Stonehorn heroes the best. In my head, it's kind of like you run 1 Frostsword on Thunder Tusk, 1 Frostsword on Stonehorn, and then maybe 3 of the other ones, and then you're just 5 drop. You have no auxiliaries, and you just try to fill out the battalions to the best of your ability. But I probably would do that. I don't really like the Beast Rider guys. I know you end up being lower drop, but most case, if you can't be 2 drop or less, you're probably not going to get to choose anyway. So I'd rather just be 5 drop. That's the maximum regiments you can take, and then try to probably take like 2 units of Born Fang or something to go do stuff on the side if I'm running Beastclaw. Or a wizard, right? You might need a wizard. Okay, Icebrow Hunter. His War Scroll is terrible. He's 130 points. So you can like outflank and then just ignore his abilities on his War Scroll because it's all terrible. I mean, at least now he can shoot both of his weapons when he comes down from Deep Strike. This is a nice change. But for some reason, he's still just like awful in combat. He has some random like bonuses against monsters, but it's 1 attack on 4s and 3s with both his things. The hunt is on is his thing where he comes down is slightly worse because you have to come wholly within 9 of a battlefield edge. You're probably just going to take it if you're taking that like -1 to hit sub-faction and you just make him a priest and you don't even outflank him. You just be annoying. Yeah. It's fine. Does it really do anything for 130? Probably not. I just put down here somewhere. It's alright. Yeah. Okay, Frost Sabers. So these I'm a little bit more hot on. So they're 70 points for 2 of them. They're 3 wounds each. They are a beast. Yeah, so I guess you can't modify their control score, unfortunately, with the spells. I think I said that before. I don't think you can do that. So you'd have to do it with like Gnoblars or something. And you're not visible to enemy units when you're within 3 of a terrain feature, more than 9 from enemy units. Pretty nice, right? Easy to dodge spells or some range damage. So you might use this sometimes. So I'd probably put them B tier. I think you will probably take some of these in Beastclaw Raiders. Okay, Mournfang Pack. So this is an interesting unit. Okay. I think that they're quite underrated. Because there's a lot of cavalry in this game at the moment. Okay. And these are the Giga Chads of the flanks. Okay, because you're often going to be playing against other cavalry units on the flanks because of the whole take the flanks meta, right? And in that situation, these are great. Okay, because your opponent's cavalry are going to be heavily reliant on their charge +1 damage weapon, and your weapons don't have that. Okay, so you can easily just stay in combat and reliably get off. Now what's interesting, I think you have to be 1 in 4 to get Musician and Standard Bearer still, yeah. So they're still hard to heal, still low control score. They give you like -1 to wound from shooting, which actually is kind of nice if you play against a shooting army to make your monsters a bit more survivable against shooting. But they're 200 points. So this is the problem, right? They're kind of expensive. So it's like, for the damage and the points, we're looking at an expensive unit. But I think because they just rule the sides and you're just going to sit in the middle with your monsters, I can really see how the army works. And I think that they really make the Beastclaw Raiders army a lot better just by existing. I don't think you'd run more than 2 units of 2. I can't really see you doing that. But as the 2 units of 2 that you would run, I think are really solid. Okay, Firebelly. So it's 8-inch range, 6 attacks, 2s and 3s, no rend 1 damage, and you get +1 damage if you shoot infantry. It would be good, except it's 140 points, and the other monsters, the other heroes are better in Gutbusters. So when would you run this guy? Well, I think you're gonna run him if you're gonna run Beastclaw Raiders, and you're gonna run the Maw Pot, not the Maw Pit. Okay. And in that situation, he's better than the other 2. Okay? So, does that make him good? Probably not. His shooting weapon's okay. Would you actually run him in a Beastclaw Raiders build? I think probably not, because the battalions have become too awkward. But, yeah. I don't know. I'd probably put him down here. He's fine. Okay. Icefall Yetis. Now, this unit does not have the Ogre keyword. Yes, so you can still benefit from the control score buffs. So potentially nice for going in for a random control score 7 and, stealing some objectives. The damage is really not there. Would you run some Yetis in Beastclaw Raiders? You might. You might run 1 or 2 units of Yetis for 120 points to support your monsters. I don't believe they have the ward anymore. So I think they're 6 up save now. And you've lost like... Oh no, they do have the ward. Okay. Well, 6 up save, 6 up ward. 12 wounds. It's still not that bad. I think wounds wise, it's still one of the more efficient units in the book. But the damage is pretty awful. But the ability is still nice, right? The enemy combat phase ability, where you can move up to 3 inches. I think technically this means if you're charged, you might be able to, depending on how you've been charged, you might be able to just move out of combat. And that could be interesting in certain situations. Or you've ended up stuck in combat because you charged them. You might be able to charge in or like power through and then move in such a way where you can tag something, and then your opponent's turn, you get to the combat phase, and you then move out of combat with the Yetis. And so you can end up with like a dream scenario where, let's say you've sent these guys in, you manage to keep your opponent's screen alive on like 1 model or something, and you power through, and you go ahead and tag their Vanguard, okay? And we get to the combat phase, and you then just move 3 inches out of combat. The Vanguard are no longer in combat. They can't pile in. And this could potentially give you some aspect of control, right? And that aspect of control could be quite good in a Beastclaw Raiders army. So maybe you could run 2 units of 3 Yetis in your Beastclaw Raiders and get some control value out of them. I still think there's some there's some angles in Beastclaw Raiders for running this, right? And even in Gutbusters, potentially there's maybe an argument. I think the only problem I can really see with them is they're quite slow now. And that is a little bit of a problem for me. They're slow, they don't do any mortals, the control score is bad. These are all issues, I think. Okay, let us discuss the terrain. So the Maw pot, you basically can add 1 to your wizard's power level. So it could be quite good. Again, if we're running a Fire Belly, we could get power level 2 in our Beastclaw Raiders list, and then have the potential to heal stuff. Could be quite nice. So the heal stuff is exactly the same as it used to be. The only thing is it's gotten quite shorter range. Okay, so you heal D3 to every friendly unit's wholly within 18. Now, because this is an ability, it can't be used more than once in the same phase. So there's no longer any like double tapping the Mort pot. So if you have some ability to do damage in the hero phase, which I can't think of the top of my head in this army. Oh, I guess Pulverizing Hailstorm, right? Yeah, that would be one. You wouldn't be able to double tap this, okay? You can tap once earlier in the battle, and then Pulverizing Hailstorm first, and then heal. Could be quite nice. And then is 6 health on a 5-up save, so ridiculously easy to get rid of, but moderate effects that are useful. On the other hand, this other one is cracked. Okay, this is insane, this Maw pit thing. So basically, it's the classic garrison thing, which they didn't make a core rule for some reason, but is a garrison, where you can put a butcher in it, and you can't actually hit the butcher. You can only hit this until it dies, which is insane. And when it dies, you then do D3 mortal wounds to the head butcher, and then set them up. Then the way you get in it is you put a butcher or slaughtermaster in it in your hero phase, and in your movement phase you can get them out. Okay. Now, its ability is you pick 3 enemy units within 12, realistically within 18, because you're going to have a head butcher, and you do the shitty D3, but you add 1 to the roll if the target's more than 3 from all other enemy units. And you just do those mortal wounds. So 3 units, you just do a mortal wound. So this is going to be great for pairing with something like Soul Snare Shackles, right? Potential to do, multiple mortal wounds to a unit. Potentially 2d3 mortal wounds could be pretty nice to start stacking up those chip damage. You could pair this in like a Lead Belcher build where you start doing lots of damage at range. And then you do damage with endless spells and that kind of thing. But for a free thing, this thing is insane. Okay, so that's where I've got to with ogres. I think that overall the army is it's one of the more interesting iterations, I think, of the book, because there's definitely some holes in here. Like the Beastclaw Raiders are very fragile. The Gutbusters are not, but they're very, very vulnerable to kind of getting bogged down by minuses to hit and units that don't die. You can solve that by running Iron Guts, but that's going to open up other problems of turn consistency, which is slightly improved by this 4th edition rule set, but still a problem. The chaff units are a lot weaker, I think, than they were, and some of the heroes I feel like are a little bit undercooked, maybe. But that's where we got to with them. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. If you're watching from YouTube, do check out the Onwards Patreon. If you subscribe from Onwards Prime, you're going to be able to see all of my other faction videos, and also the games that we post, and other content up there. So if you're interested in that, check that out. You can also access coaching if you're interested in doing that. You can receive coaching from me if you would like. I especially love coaching people who play like, the Stewart armies, but I also kind of just play a lot of stuff now because it's 4th edition and I'm coaching all sorts of people. So if you're interested in that, I'm happy to coach anyone. So get in touch if you're interested in that. Otherwise, do support by just continue watching, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.